you've grown this portfolio from nothing to 150 properties under management. What was the strategy?
I think we'll be at a point we're going to be risking the business.
Why is it that you're no longer necessarily wanting to go with the arbitrage?
We made mistakes. We learned the hard way.
If you hadn't taken risks, you would not be here. Let's talk about the dark period of COVID. What helped you during those difficult times?
These property owners will keep calling us back. A lot more risk, but a lot more upside.
All right, welcome everyone to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. And today I'm very excited to have Louis-Philippe Therrien, founder and CEO at Dense Stays. Actually, somewhat of a neighbor also in Montreal. Welcome, Louis. Very excited to have you on.
Thank you very much. Also excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure, man. So look, the show is called the Hospitality Edge. So I like to start by asking, what does hospitality mean to you? And how do you try to differentiate yourself in the way that you deliver hospitality in your business?
All right. Our edge. I think that over the years, we were able to be very, very, very consistent. And I think that when you're booking with us, you know what you get. And we don't try to pretend to be a brand or people that we're not in the luxury segment. We're more in the trendy, cool segment in really, really trendy neighborhoods of Montreal. So you stay true to who you are and offer a very consistent guest experience, and that will create your edge over time.
So consistency and knowing what's your niche and knowing, that you cannot be everything for everyone. All right. So Louis, you have a pretty impressive story. I mean, you've grown this portfolio from nothing to now, 150 properties that you guys have under management. Walk us through that. I mean, the very beginnings of it all. Where does it start? How do you get into this business? And where were you back then? Like, what was going on in your life?
Interesting story. I started this with previous business partners as a kind of a sideline business. I was working in a completely different industry, in a wholesale distribution industry. And that industry is also very seasonal. So we would work extremely hard for a short period of the year. And then I would have a lot of free time for, let's say, almost 2/3 of the year. And then at the same time, during that period, I met my wife, who is now my business partner, and she was a corporate lawyer at the time. So she was extremely busy all year round. So I had to find something to do during those 2/3 of the year that I had a lot of free time on. I couldn't just pack my bags and go traveling again. So I started this business about 8 years ago now as a sideline, and it quickly became a passion. So over the years, maybe 3 or 4 years in, it became a priority. So I let go of my job and went into this full on. And the beginnings were slow because we were operating 100% at the time on a lease arbitrage model. So and it wasn't a very well known industry here in Montreal. So I really, really had to convince the landlords and the property owners that their property was going to be kept in a better state than if they were to rent it to a resident. So that was the hardest part at the beginning. But once we got up and running and were able to prove ourselves, then these property owners would keep calling us back whenever something would become available. And that's how we started.
So a few points there, a few things I just want to dig deeper on. So you are, you have your job, it's seasonal, you have time on your, on your agenda. And so you decide, okay, let's get busy. All right. How does that convert into, like, let's start leasing some, apartments and subleasing them? Like, where did the arbitrage concept or idea came about? Did you get into it by accident? Was it like actually like planned out? Like, how did it happen?
It wasn't my idea, actually. It was friends of mine. They're a couple, and they were also world travelers. At one point, they had to move into a new apartment. But then they wanted new furniture, so they kept their old apartment and they started listing it on Airbnb at the time. And then they moved again, and then they had two Airbnb apartments, and they thought it was great because they were using all this like extra petty cash to travel. And they're like, okay, well, maybe we do a third one. And when they did a third one, that's when they realized that they were way too busy with their full-time jobs and managing their apartments. So then that's when they reached out to me because they knew that I was looking for something to do. And I've always been passionate about hospitality and real estate. So it was a good match at the beginning, and then grew the business. Eventually, we went our separate ways, and I kept the business. And then I met another business partner that is a pretty big player here in the real estate industry in Montreal. So we grew the
Mhm.
business together.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So, okay, you started doing this, and you know, back then, I guess, yeah, as you mentioned, the challenge, the original challenge had to do with just getting those landlords to accept, right? Like, I know it has gotten harder and harder to the point because there's been horror stories like in the media, like it's particularly, in Montreal and whatnot, but also around the world. So a lot of landlords, are, no longer that open to it. But back then when you started, like, I'm assuming it wasn't easy either. So like, what did you learn in terms of like, what worked, and what didn't work as far as you being able to get, landlords to accept? And also, what was the strategy? Were you getting one apartment at a time, or were you doing like mass leases and going with a building at a time?
At the time, it was one unit, one apartment at a time. We had no money back then, so we couldn't commit to like huge leases. And one argument we used to convince building owners to rent out our apartment to us is that I would tell them that I would renovate their unit, so they wouldn't have to pay for that renovation. Obviously, we don't do that anymore, but back then we did it just
Okay.
to convince them, So they would rent it out to us at market, so very low rent since it wasn't renovated. We would then go in, renovate it, on a shoestring. Like we would do a lot of work ourselves, decorate it, and then launch it onto the OTAs. And then it only took a few of those to convince them that wow, this is a great deal. Like so that's how we started convincing them. Obviously that's evolved now, and now we do master leases for entire buildings that are fully renovated and up to our brand standards.
Okay. Okay. So you were basically, you know, absorbing the risk of that upfront cost, and
The
that
capex, yeah, exactly.
that became a differentiating aspect, making them more open, in terms of
Mhm.
going towards you versus renting traditionally. Now, okay, so you are in the middle of that. Talk to me about the timeline. From the first, you know, property you start doing arbitrage with, all the way until the moment where you change models and you actually start managing other people's, properties, and you go from being only an arbitrage operator to also being a property management, like the timeline, sort of like the stages of that growth, and also where, the realization that you had to change models, or perhaps where that opportunity to start managing other people's properties came about as well.
Yeah, those opportunities only came about, let's say, 2 years ago. We started doing management deals. Prior to
Mm-hmm.
that, we were strictly arbitrage, and the reason for that is we had tried it a while back, let's say maybe 4 years ago, and I really was too busy and not very good at reporting properly to that first owner, and I didn't have enough time. Like I was so involved in the operations, I didn't like it, frankly. I didn't want to have to answer to anybody. I preferred to actually just pay rent, make a nice deal where everyone's happy, and then I do whatever I have to do, and I focus on our operations instead of focusing on spending so much
Mm-hmm.
time on reporting and making everybody else happy. So that was my mentality. And also, there's a lot more upside, in my opinion, on the arbitrage model versus the management. A lot more risk, but a lot more upside. So never been risk adverse. Maybe I should be a little more, but that's in my nature. So that's the reason why we didn't do it at first. The reason why we're doing it now is because we have a solid team in place, and we have the organization in place to report to these owners and answer their requests or their demands in a timely manner. And I feel now comfortable doing it properly, whereas before I wasn't comfortable.
Okay, so it was quite late in the process that you started managing other people's properties. Once you had that infrastructure and you were like, might as well add that on. Okay, so you touched on, well, two things I want to discuss there, like the risk, profile of yours. Let's start there. Like, so you, from what I heard, you had been a traveler, right, before. So I mean, there's a little bit of that adventurous nature that comes with that. But like when you say you were pretty risk, tolerant and whatnot, like at first, like that first stage of your growth when you were just, taking that risk of paying for, the renovations up front, like how calculated were those risks at first, as far as you knowing, oh, you know what, like I'm forecasting that I'm gonna have a payback period of like, X number of months, and like I know I'm gonna, be able to start being cash flow positive after, 6 months or whatever, or 3 months or whatever, versus, you just boldly testing the waters and figuring things out. Like what was your mindset there, as far as how much you were being, I would say, analytical about it versus just like, hey, let's just try things and fail and learn from those mistakes.
Good question. I'd say yeah, maybe a bit of both here. I like to, when I have a gut feeling, I like to go for it,
Yeah.
and I like to go fast. Over the years, with the wisdom, now I've learned to be more analytical, like you mentioned. But at first, I was still employed, right? I still had my job at the other company, which was a very good job. So the risks were small, in my opinion. We were talking about small numbers, and if ever it didn't work out, I still was getting a paycheck every week. So I didn't. It wasn't gonna put me in any dangerous position at all. You know.
So it was risky, but you had a safety net. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you could take risks. And
Yeah.
when you decided to quit your job, was that a hard decision for you? Was it a no-brainer at that point because you were making so much more money than in your job? Or like, was it something where you really had to like think through it and be like, oh, do I really want to do this? Like, how did that decision come about?
That was a no-brainer. I just knew I had to do it. But au contraire, like I didn't. I took a major pay cut by doing that. Huge, more than 50%. So I really believed in my business. And in hindsight, if I had kept going in that same business, distribution business, I would probably be making a lot more money than I am now. But
Hmm.
I'm starting to feel the hockey stick curve, and the business is finally becoming stronger and stronger because remember, on a lease arbitrage model, COVID really hit us hard and set us
Hmm.
back a solid 3 years. So now, finally, finished recovering from COVID, and now I can really feel the momentum. It's fun to be in a place whereby people are calling you and you're not calling them. Uh,
Hmm.
so the momentum is there, and we never really did it for the money because we're passionate, and my wife joined us, and we're just entrepreneurs at heart. And the money is a byproduct; it'll come eventually because we work really hard, and I always believe that hard work always gets noticed and gets paid. So it's a matter of time. But one thing's for sure is that the passion is there, and it would never ever go back.
Well, that's interesting, and I guess it just goes to show that, sometimes you got to take a bit of a step back in order to take two steps forward, type of thing. But it also goes to show that, things take time, right? It's been 8 years, and you're saying if you had stayed at the other place, you would still be making more money. But it doesn't mean that you won't end up making more money with your current thing. It just means that it might take 10 years, right? It might take, who knows. But as long as you're doing it because you're enjoying the work and you're enjoying the process, I guess that's really what matters. Now, the whole arbitrage model, to your point, you've outlined a few of the upsides of it, like more upside, like more money than versus like managing. You don't have to deal with reporting to owners. You don't have to deal with, it's basically you take your own decisions as long as you're paying your rent. But of course, there's the risk of the rent, right? If there's a COVID that comes, well, you still have to pay that rent, right? Tell us more about what you like and dislike, if there's any other things that you can think about arbitrage versus management. And currently though, like, are you still seeing the same amount of opportunity in arbitrage, or do you think that it's a wave that has passed and like it's too late now, and you're no longer focused on growing that side of the business?
Interesting. We're having that debate just last week. I like the arbitrage model a lot outside of COVID era, if you want, because you can focus so hard on your operation. You don't have to report and think and be worried about anybody else. But actually, this economy is helping us a lot in the sense that since interest rates have gone up so much, landlords' expenses have gone up significantly. So they're all looking for ways to generate more revenue in their properties. And they're becoming more and more open-minded and motivated to convert their properties to vacation rentals, hotels, boutique hotels. And so they're willing to reinvest and they're willing to do the work, get the permits, and be creative. But they don't have the expertise that we have to operate these properties. So who do they call? They call operators. They call us. Say, I have to have this project. I heard about you, or my friend referred. We know that you're in the business. Could you give us projections on, if we go ahead with the project, how much we could make, this and that. And when they see these numbers, they always choose the management model because they want the upside and they're okay with the cash flow fluctuations with the seasonality.
So okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean that you're not seeing as much opportunity for you as an arbitrage operator to, like, you are, because more people are open to it, but like, yeah, if you present them the two options, they're gonna go with the management. So I mean, the fact that you're presenting them the two means you're okay with them accepting the management. Why is that? Why is it that you're no longer necessarily wanting to go with the arbitrage?
It's because we learned a thing or two during COVID, right? We got a bit wiser and we feel more vulnerable than we felt before. We were growing super quickly and always reinvesting heavily into the business prior to COVID. And obviously, we had a tough time. It wasn't easy. I probably aged like 10 years during those 3 years. So, taking some risk off the table and getting into some larger management deals makes sense for us at this point. If the landlord or the building owner wants to enter into a lease, obviously we're still going to look at it.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Tell us more about that wisdom that you acquired during COVID.
Well, I mean, I come from a ski racing background, and I had a young age, a quite successful career. I won the world championships when I was 15 years old, and I was ranked top 15 in the world when I was older than that. And I unfortunately had to quit ski racing because of injuries, but I've always been pretty aggressive in going and getting things, and so I was bringing that same philosophy and way of doing things into the business world. But unfortunately, it made me realize that, or fortunately, that a lot of things can be out of your control. No matter how hard you work, some things can just be out of your control. So it taught me to be a bit more conscious of the risks and to maybe continue reinvesting in the business to grow it, but also to maybe set aside a few more dollars for a rainy day.
No, I think that's very, very relevant advice for anyone, right?
Yeah.
I guess people are starting to. I mean, when times are good, everyone is bold, and then when times are not, then that's where everyone realizes that they should be more cautious. Why not, be cautious even when times are good? But then again, if you hadn't taken risks, you would not be here. So, like, yeah, there's a bit of a balance there that goes on. But okay, so right now, let's move to where you are currently, as far as, like, I know you have received a lot of inbound leads, a lot of inbound, interest for your management service, for your property management services. However, there's a lot of consolidation, as happening in the space. and you've been part of that as far as acquiring and merging with other players. So when you look at M&A, mergers and acquisitions, as a way to grow a management portfolio, what are some of the considerations that you look at? Why do you think that's perhaps an opportunity if you're trying to scale a management portfolio, and what are some of the lessons that you've learned in those transactions that you've been involved with?
Okay, so M&A, I think, is going to become more and more important going forward for the reason for one reason. Basically, it's very hard to get vacation rental permits or short-term rental permits nowadays in the province of Quebec, for that matter, anywhere else in Canada. So there are only so many permits available. So it's kind of a race to the permits at the moment. So that's why M&A becomes very important. If you want to grow, then you got to look at your competition and say, okay, well, these guys have X amount of permits. I want to grow organically. It would take me X amount of years, whatever, and I could try to penetrate that market and create competition, or I could make them a fair offer and see if that works out. So
Mm-hmm.
because of regulation, I think M&A will be super relevant, important in the next while. And the lesson that we've learned so far is that taking over someone's operation is a lot. It's a lot of work. We underestimated the work that it involves. We have quality standards. We have ways of doing things, and it doesn't mean that the other ways that the other processes that were in place in the business with the old administration isn't good. It just means that it's different, and if you want to do it your way, there's a lot of steps, a lot of work to do, and making sure that everyone's on board with that is not easy also. So you're buying and essentially the permits, the contracts, but you're also buying, a workforce, brain power, and you're buying the team. And so if that team isn't in line with your mentality, it could be quite challenging.
Yeah, the cultural aspect of post-merger or post-acquisition integration. Yeah, that's tough, right? We were talking about it the other day
Yeah.
of camera. Like it's they're used to doing things a certain way, and you might be coming with better benefits. You might be coming with career development opportunities. The whole thing, all they see is, or all some of them might see is, the one task you're now asking them to record or to register on a task management software. And so yeah, it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so that's a lesson. So you underestimated the amount of work. Knowing what you know now in terms of the amount of work that it actually takes, you still are equally interested in making further acquisitions.
Yes, not in the near future because
You want to take a
we're
breath.
still. I want to take a breath. We all want to take a breath. We're still restructuring the first one we acquired. Once that's done, definitely we're going to analyze the competition and see what the next step is. Because through an acquisition, you also take out a competitor. So it's it's two birds with one stone, basically.
Two birds with one stone. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And we are seeing, I mean, we are no longer seeing the multiples we were seeing in the past, and there's different ways of evaluating companies, but without getting into the specifics at a high level, like what would you say you should be looking for, or at least you specifically, what were you looking for, that checked the marks and told you yes, like this is a move I want to make, this makes sense, there's synergies, and like other than the financials, like I want to move forward here.
Yeah. One of the main reason was that the acquisition was made in the market. That's very how do you say? It's a different seasonality basically. So we operate mostly in Montreal, and we made an acquisition in Montreal. So Montreal is very quiet during winter, whereas Montreal is very busy. So complementary market, basically. That's what I was getting to. That was the main factor. And the second factor was that could we turn this around into a profitable business within 1 year? Yeah. So
Okay.
we identified that it was possible with the help of a firm that specializes in vacation rental M&A transactions. And so we made the offer and they accepted.
Yeah, that's it. Sounds easy, huh?
That's yeah, you know what? Like sometimes you have to be a little naive to, I guess, get things done. And I think on this one we might have been a little bit, but still super happy we did it, and it's working out. It's a lot of work, but it's we definitely, it was the first time around. Second time around will be, I think, much better, much easier.
For sure. No, and
Yeah.
what you said on balancing the seasonality of the portfolio is, I think, also an important, key takeaway for property managers. That at the end of the day, well, whether you charge a commission or not, like it is seasonal, right? Like it
Mhm.
is even if you're an arbitrage operator, it's seasonal, right? And so like finding, of course, unless you're in like urban centers where like it's really year round demand, but even then there's going to be some level of seasonality. So yeah, I mean balancing that out makes a lot of sense. I think nowadays it's more and more possible with kind of like the way we do it, which is remotely being able to go into different markets around the world, and that definitely helps. But now let's talk about, okay, so you actually want to go back for a second, sorry about that, to the dark period of COVID. Not necessarily to talk about COVID, but more so like about your resilience personally during those difficult times. Like you mentioned that you've been an athlete. I genuinely admire the mentality of athletes. I love to read about, you know, the David Goggins of this world, and the guy that coached Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. Like I think there's a lot of similarities in like the mindset that an athlete needs to have to attack the challenges that happen in sports, and then the challenges that take place in the business world. So are you into any of that, like reading, or is it just like you just go through life, just tackling one problem at a time and don't overthink it too much? Like what do you think helped you during those difficult times?
I think during those difficult times, my thing that had helped me the most was the support of my wife, because, in my opinion, I was putting the entire family in danger because of my business undertaking, the risk I took, the leverage that we took to get the business up and running. So she always supported me and never doubted me for a second. So that gave me the power to fight through and essentially convince all the landlords that, they wouldn't lose a penny or with Dent stays. They may have to be a bit more patient, but they wouldn't lose a penny. And that's, for me, that was the most important part, is gaining their trust and getting them to believe in us and the company and me as an individual, that, you know, they weren't going to lose any money. So the thing that helped me with the most was the support from my family.
The support, yeah. No, that's huge. That's huge. A lot of times entrepreneurs might get perhaps too lonely in the sense that they isolate themselves because they're like, so focused on just doing. But I guess just taking the time to connect with other, whether that's fellow entrepreneurs or, whether that's family, wife, husband, whatever that might be, helps you stay grounded, I guess. Cool. Now, what is ahead for you? Like, what's the vision moving forward? I guess, like you said, coming out of this difficult periods now, you can think more strategically. Of course, you made this acquisition, but like, what are you trying to optimize for? What are you trying to achieve? Where do you see yourself and then stays, over the next couple of years? Talk to us about that vision that you have moving forward.
Moving forward, in the short term, we want to get to 200 units, hopefully by the end of 2024. So once that's done, we'll see. But we're on a mission to do that. And I think once that's done, then we're going to be, I don't know, maybe reassessing and figuring out, like, family wise, what are our goals? Because I think we'll be at a point where, you know we're going to be we're going to be de-risking the business. We want to make sure everyone around us is making a good living at the same time as us, and then we'll see, because we need to enjoy life a bit. We've been working really, really hard, and that's fine. But I'd like to spend a bit more time with my kids, and maybe having a better work life balance is the next step.
I mean, after 8 years of just nonstop and
Yeah.
the whole stress that comes with it, I can understand that. I can understand that desire to, okay, stabilize things a bit perhaps, and say, okay, let's have more balance. Cool. One thing though, are you into real estate too? Like as part of what you've done, have you acquired properties along the way that you also manage, that you also do short-term rentals with? And what can you tell us, if so, about your sort of real estate career?
Yes, we have a bit of real estate, and it's mostly long-term rental, believe it or not.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was mentioning I've always liked real estate, so we were investing in real estate as we were building this business, and it's okay, it's worked out, but in hindsight, we should have really, really focused on real estate that can be permitted for short-term rental. I think now that's definitely what the strategy is to keep acquiring real estate, but strictly in the short-term or vacation rental world, not in the long-term rental world.
I talk to a lot of people in this show that also have both, right? And there's pros and cons, multifamily or long-term rentals versus short-term rentals. I always repeat the same, but like short-term rentals has more liquidity. Multifamily, you get more leverage out of it, which is
Yeah.
cool. Now, I'm curious to know, when you say you want to focus on, I mean, it makes sense now with interest rates where they are, to say, hey, let's focus on acquiring things that can be rented as short term. Are you still looking at urban centers, or are you even looking at centers, or the risk of regulation changing for you, it's so high that you rather go in, Montreal, or like, ski areas or more touristic areas, because we've seen regulations change within the city so much that it's kind of like scary almost to say, oh, I'm gonna go and buy something in the one street or two streets where it's allowed, and then all of a sudden, boom, regulation changes, and how are you gonna now, pay for that debt, if you over leverage yourself or whatnot? So what are you thinking of in terms of next acquisition strategies?
I haven't determined the exact strategy at this point. We're heavily invested in a few properties right now, so it's not on the near term radar. But
Okay.
I feel pretty comfortable with the state of regulations at the moment in the province
Okay.
of Quebec. So they really enforced it last year. They cleaned up, and now I feel like it's a level playing field for everybody. Everything's clear. So I don't think it's going to change very much going forward because, I mean, our industry brings huge revenue to these markets and to either urban or rural. It's the municipalities need it to stay alive, basically. So I don't think I've always been pro regulation because we've always gotten our permits and done things by the book. So the more regulations there are, if you can navigate them, get your permits, you sleep well at night, the better it is. It takes care of the loyal competition, basically.
Hmm.
So,
So you
um,
think it's gotten to a point where it shouldn't change too much? At least,
exactly.
we're talking Montreal, like we're talking Quebec, we're talking like, we're not
Yeah,
talking worldwide, of course, here.
yeah, yeah. It's very restricted already, and I think now everyone is quite happy with how the regulations are being enforced, and it's very clear. And there aren't too many loopholes that people are finding to get into the short term rental. I think right now we've reached like a mature stage in terms of regulation in this industry.
Cool. Now, just to wrap up, because I know we have to finish this soon, but more like principles or advice or tips that you would give to someone that wants to have the kind of success you've had, and in the sense that, again, having 150 properties is pretty good. It's a good accomplishment, and there might be property managers or operators that are trying to get there. Not everything is size, as we know. There's things that are more important than just, hey, how many properties you've got. But it's a metric that
Yeah.
allows you to keep score, like others might too. So what would you like, to have known before that you know now, that you could share with the audience here as far as advice?
It, it's a hospitality business. So I went into it with no hospitality experience, and we made mistakes. We learned the hard way. So if you're going to get into the vacation rental or short-term rental, call it whatever you want, hospitality business, go and read some books, or go and get go to school for it. Get trained properly for the hospitality business. It's it's a unique business. It's a lot of fun, but it's all about the guest. It's all about the guest. So you make your guest happy, and everything else follows suit, and everything goes well.
So care about the guest, put the
Yeah,
guest first. Yeah.
absolutely. Put the guest first, and the rest secondary.
Yeah, there's the team too, right? You gotta keep them into the equation, right? It's also like, I've heard, take care of your team, they're gonna take care of your guest, and the guest is gonna take care of you, like in terms
Hmm.
of the money, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, of course, putting the guest, like teaching the team, and it's not easy though. Like, just though, I swear this is the last topic I want to touch on, but like, you might have that mindset now, but like, how do you go about communicating it and passing on to your team? Like, how do you go about ensuring that your team is actually complying with those same standards of quality or standards of excellence? Like, what has worked for you as far as that? Is it just, clear values? Is it just very strict processes? Is it just, very strict hiring? Like, what is it for you that has worked?
Leading by example and having just very, very clear values. We want to make sure guests have an amazing experience. And, if we make a mistake, we own up to it, and we apologize to the guests, and we make it right every time. So when your team sees that, obviously that those values flow through your actions and through your discussions with the guests, and they hear you, and they see the messages or the emails go by, and they see how genuine it is. And if we do make a mistake and we feel bad, and we own up to it and we make it right. So when your team sees that, they know deep down that you're a good person and that you're going to take care of them. If you're taking care of your guests, you're going
Yeah, no, I love it. Lead by example, and you're pretty. I think from all the discussions we've had off camera, like you're pretty hands on too. Like there's not a single thing you're gonna be like, oh, like I'm the founder of this thing, I'm not gonna touch that. No, no, no. If you have to do revenue, you're gonna do revenue. You have to do like, listings, you're gonna do listings. You have to do guests, you're gonna do guest stuff. So I think that's the whole, leading by example thing that you're referring to here. So yeah, I mean, Louis, I could have you on for hours because this has been very fun. But time to wrap up. Thank you for your time. Anywhere where you would like people to stay in touch with you, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. It was fun. First podcast for me in the world of hospitality. So thanks a lot. It's an honor to be here. It was great. People can reach out to us on our website, danstays.com, and we'll be happy to book some time, book some meetings, and exchange ideas. That'd be great. Always open to meet new, interesting people.
Cool. Amazing. All right, Louis. Well, thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk again very soon.
Okay, take care.
Have a good one. Bye.